difference between fighting the timber and working with it often comes down to something most people never notice: the edge of the blade. And before this reclaimed red gum can reveal its true character, there's one job that can't be overlooked: a perfectly sharpened set of planer blades. After spending more than 30 years exposed to the elements, this timber had become incredibly hard. Every pass through the machines demanded patience, sharp tools, and a little respect for what Australian hardwood is capable of. The goal was simple: turn these rough, weathered sleepers into perfectly square boards, ready for the next stage of the build. Slowly, one pass at a time, the rough sleepers began to reveal clean faces, straight edges, and the grain that had been hidden beneath years of wear. As more of the reclaimed red gum passed through the machines, the workshop also slowly began to change. A fine layer of deep red dust settled over everything. The floor, the tools, even the air seemed to take on the colour of timber itself. It was messy, relentless work, but there was something strangely satisfying about it. Working hardwood like this demands patience, precision, and complete focus. Every cut has to be deliberate, every pass considered. It's a reminder that craftsmanship isn't so different from the discipline the samurai were known for. Not a battle against an enemy, but a constant pursuit of mastery over your tools, your material, and yourself. In Japan, there's a word: Sharpening. It describes a craftsman dedicated to their work, always striving to improve. Standing in a cloud of red gum dust, it's easy to appreciate that mindset. With just a little sanding and one final coat of clear finish, the circle cutting jig was finally complete. It might not look like much, but every custom tool has a purpose. This one had been built for a single job: to cut the perfect circle and take this project one step closer to becoming a finished table. Pretty soon we would see if it would do exactly what it was designed to do. There's something incredibly satisfying about working with reclaimed timber. At first glance, these old red gum sleepers look tired, weathered, and well past their best. But as the outer layers were slowly peeled away, something completely different began to emerge. Beneath decades of dirt, sun, and weather was a rich, vibrant grain that had been hidden all along. What once looked like scrap was revealing itself to be a genuine, hidden gem. And that's one of the things I love about working with reclaimed timber. Even this bag of red gum wood chips looked too good to throw away. The rich red colour was almost too nice to call waste. So rather than sending it to the bin, I gave it to Dad to use as mulch in the garden. It's satisfying knowing that wherever possible, every part of the timber can go on to serve another purpose. With the final machining complete, it was time to decide how the tabletop would come together. Each board had its own character, with subtle differences in colour, grain and figure. Before a single drop of glue could be applied, I spent some time arranging and rearranging the layout, searching for the combination that felt the most balanced and brought out the best in the timber. Sometimes the difference between a good piece and a great one comes down to taking the time to let the timber tell you where it belongs. Once I was happy with the layout, it was time to mark out the tabletop. Using a simple wooden pivot block secured with double-sided tape, I measured the radius and slowly traced out the circle. Sometimes the simplest jigs are the most effective, and this little setup gave me an accurate reference for what the finished table would eventually become. With the layout finalised, the next step was to trim each board to length, removing the split ends and anything that wouldn't make it into the finished tabletop. From there, I cut biscuit slots along each joint to help keep the boards aligned during glue up. They're not there to add strength, they simply make the assembly far easier and help keep everything flush while the clamps do their job. Rather than tackling the entire tabletop in one go, I decided to glue it up in two separate halves. It made the process much more manageable and gave me a better chance of keeping everything aligned before bringing the two sections together. With the first glue up complete, it was time to flatten the joints and remove any slight imperfections left behind by the clamps. I worked through the surface gradually, starting with 60 grit before moving to 80 and finally 120 grit. Each pass brought the two halves closer to a single seamless slab. Normally I would have continued sanding, but there was no point just yet. The two halves still had to be joined together, and the epoxy pour would mean that the entire tabletop would need another round of sanding anyway. Stopping at 120 grit saved time now and avoided doing the same work twice later. This was the moment the project reached a major turning point. Up until now, I'd been working with individual boards and two separate glue-ups. Bringing the two halves together was the first time it truly began to resemble a table. It wasn't the easiest glue-up to manage. Balancing one half while applying the glue made things a little awkward, but the new bar clamps handled the job exactly as I'd hoped. They pulled everything together beautifully and proved to be a worthwhile investment, not just for this project, but for many more to come. Sometimes a single glue up is all it takes to transform a pile of timber into something that finally starts to tell its story. Once the clamps came off, one thing became immediately obvious. This tabletop was heavy. Moving it around the workshop took a bit of planning, and I had to be careful not to put my back under too much strain. For a moment, I wondered whether a slightly thinner top might have been the easier option. But from the very beginning, I wanted this table to represent Samurai Joinery. A solid 30mm red gum top gives it a sense of strength, permanence and presence that simply wouldn't be the same if I'd made it thin. Sometimes the extra weight is the price you pay for building something that's designed to last. Now it was finally time to cut the tabletop to shape. I started by rough cutting the circle with a jigsaw, staying just outside the layout line. It wasn't an easy job. This old red gum was by far the hardest timber I'd worked with, and it fought me every step of the way. Leaving a small amount of material behind meant the router and the circle cutting jig only had to remove the final few millimetres. Even then, I took it slowly, making light passes of around 2 to 3 millimetres at a time. With hardwood like this, patience is always rewarded, and there's no point trying to rush the process. In the end, the patience paid off. Pass by pass, the circle cutting jig did exactly what it was designed to do. And before long, a perfect round tabletop began to emerge. I'll admit, I was nervous when I made that first cut. But with a timber this hard, there's only one approach that works. Take your time and trust the process. The close-up shots speak for themselves. What started as a stack of weathered red gum sleepers had finally begun to reveal the table hidden inside. But this is where the project has to pause, at least for now. With winter well and truly here in Melbourne, the temperatures are simply too low for the epoxy pour that I've planned. Rather than rushing the next stage and risking the result, I'm going to build a solution that will let me complete the table properly. Join me in the next episode as we tackle that challenge and take another step towards bringing this red gum table to life. If you enjoyed following the journey, I'd really appreciate you giving the video a like and subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode of Samurai Joinery.